Hello and welcome to another edition of Proselytize or Apostatize Raw. I'm your host, David Russell, along with my co-host, David Paulman. What's up, David?
What's up? How's it going?
It's going good, man. Now we're live. I invited anybody that wanted to come on and go through this video that you gave me last week. What made you pick the genetically modified skeptic again?
You know, I've always liked Drew. Just I don't know, his style is fun, and I think he seems like he's an intelligent guy. I don't think his objections are the best, but yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed him, and this particular video was like making the rounds. I think my first year in college, and yeah, a lot of like the people in my school didn't really know how to didn't know what was wrong with these parodies. And, you know, even some of them I had to think about a little bit myself. But yeah, so I think it's just good to bring some greater clarity to the issue. And so, you know, it was kind of always one of those atheist videos I wished had a response to it. And I think Cameron from Capturing Christianity did do a response on some of them. But I thought, you know, we could go into it in a little more detail here.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna play it here in a second, but I'm gonna start getting people in here with us, not the second, but after our introduction, because I'm going to make you tell the news to the audience of what's going on with you in a couple months.
Yeah, a couple months. I'm going to be leaving PorA, which doesn't mean that I won't make guest appearances or that you'll never see me again, but I won't be hosting full time because I'm going to be getting a new job and moving, and so not sure if I'll have time for podcasting. So we'll be getting a new host on here. So big changes at PorA are coming.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested as well, you can also get in contact with me or David, and we will get you on the show as well and see how you are, and we'll talk and so forth. But yeah, so as far as introductions goes, I also wanted to see how you were doing as far as the pandemic and if anything's opening up. We know there's some trouble with your governor up there. So why don't you speak to that for a second?
I mean, things have been better. Honestly, we got more things opening up. People are just tired of lockdown and stuff. And yes, a lot of people are not happy with Governor Cuomo. So we'll see. The Tappan Zee Bridge actually unofficially got renamed. Got named after Governor Cuomo, and yeah, now they changed that because nobody likes him anymore. So it's back to the Tappan Zee Bridge. But yeah, so we'll see how that turns out.
Right on. Well, guys, you could see to my right the YouTube screen, which we are going to start critiquing this video. But first, let's add our first guest to the stream. You can stay as long as you want. Welcome, Travis.
Travis,
what's going on, David and David?
What's up, buddy? Did you hear the exciting news about David leaving the podcast world?
I did. That's good. I mean, good. You got a lot of big things going on, but of course, we'll obviously miss you on the show too.
Miss being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will. David's a strong voice for the faith, and I'm glad he likes abandoning his ministries. But that's typical of a heretic, you know. So I expect it, you know.
A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
Oh, look, we got the honest atheist on as well. What's up, buddy? How you doing, James?
Woohoo!
Yeah. So we're gonna get started here and go through these. I want to kind of flesh these out as we go. So, Travis, buckle up. You're in for a ride, buddy.
Okay. Yeah, I've actually never seen any of his videos, so this should be good.
I can't hear it on this end, Russell.
You can't hear it at all?
I can't hear it at all.
How about you, Travis? Did you hear it, Travis?
Oh. No.
So I can share my screen, but it's not taking in my sound.
See, I thought
can
you
hear
had
the
these
sound.
bugs worked out, man.
Well, this is a new platform, so we're gonna
we're
test
supposed to
some
be
theories here. Let
we're
me
supposed to be
see if we
pros
hear
at
now.
this, man.
No?
Still nothing.
No, I can just see him, but no audio.
Yeah,
Did you hear it
visual's
then?
perfect.
Did you hear it
Nothing.
then? Nothing?
Oh,
All right, let's see. How about now?
Still nothing.
nada.
Audience, can you hear? James, can you hear the audio? And now?
Still nothing.
All right. Let's see. Well, that's no good.
Well, everyone, looks like you're not getting a show tonight.
I know, right? Let's see how we can do this.
There must be some audio thing at like how you can connect it into StreamYard that's just not there.
Too bad we don't have Ethan on.
Ethan would work all the bugs out for us. Message him. Tell him to get his butt over here.
He's got like a Bible study he's doing tonight.
Responding to atheists is more important than Bible studies, man. I'm kidding.
That's right.
Still nothing. Well, this is awkward. Oh, I heard myself over there. There's that's something new.
Oh, actually, I had my phone on. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't hearing myself on Russell's
okay.
end. I was hearing myself on your end.
Yeah.
The stress levels are so high right now.
So, David, why don't you introduce another apologetic issue? You can actually kind of explain more of this video
Like when
and
you get
what
your epistemology
we're
wrecked by
going
that
through. So,
Yeah, so basically what genetically modified skeptic Drew is doing here is he's kind of offering like atheist parodies of apologetic arguments, right? Arguments that Christians will give. And he means for these to obviously be ridiculous and say that, you know, no one would ever conclude that atheism was true on this basis. So then, you know, then you shouldn't, you know, obviously on the basis of these arguments, you would never conclude that God exists or that Christianity is true. And of course, what we're going to try to show is that these are, in some cases, not actually fair parodies because there's going to be a relevant point of disanalogy between the argument Drew is making and how, like, at least to the best version of the apologetic argument would be presented. Then there are other cases where, yeah, the arguments are terrible, and we're going to agree with Drew that, yeah, Christians shouldn't use these arguments because just like he's saying, you could very easily parody the argument for atheism. So in some cases, I think his parodies work. Some cases, I think they don't. And so that's why I thought it would be a good video to discuss, because it would, show how we could effectively respond and clarify our position on some arguments, and then also bring some, greater light to certain arguments that we shouldn't use, like Ken Ham's argument.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it almost sounds like this would be one of those cases when you could kind of compare, the theoretical virtues and theory choice, like simplicity, explanatory scope, and power. I don't know if he's going there, or is it more just like bad apologetic arguments, or
some of it's bad apologetic arguments, but some of it is like he tries to parody William Lane Craig's ontological argument and try to show how you could, use that same a similar construction to make an argument for atheism. I don't think his parody works in that case, but then he'll also like parody like Ken Ham's argument, taking man's word over God's word, and he'll say like taking man's word over Ham's word, right? Which is that was a clever one. I like that one when he goes there. You're making me spoil the video for everyone. Sorry, go ahead, Travis.
No, I was going to say it's kind of funny because when he's arguing against like this strict fundamentalism, there's probably a lot we might agree with him on.
Oh yeah. There'll be plenty of points in this video where we will be agreeing with Drew and shaking our head about the fundamentalists. Running out of topics over here, Russell. Oh, did Russell leave us? That'd be so awkward. This is already awkward.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel awkward.
What are you reading, Travis? Let's talk about what we're reading.
I'm about to leave you, Hey, I'm about to leave you here by yourself.
Oh my goodness. Then I'll just have to talk about presuppositionalism and why it sucks.
Right. Right now, I've kind of been like doing my school stuff, but I just got David Chalmers' book on consciousness that I want to get started on, and then I'm kind of look at Hegel's philosophy of mind, and so I'm really wanting to start like really looking into like to the philosophy of mind. So I'm really, I have sort of a basic understanding of it, but I'm really wanting to go deeper into that.
Nice. Yeah, philosophy of mind is interesting. It's not something that I have as much familiarity with. I want to get into some of like more of like J.P. Moreland's arguments for God from consciousness and stuff, because there's a lot of stuff on philosophy of mind there. But yeah, I mean, myself, I'm reading Naturalism Defeated, which is it's like a collection of essays on Alvin Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism, with essays on both sides. So like it's got essays by atheists talking about why they don't think the argument works, essays by theists thinking it does. I'm kind of inclined to say I don't think Plantinga's argument here works. So I'm kind of in agreement with some of the atheists, but it does touch on philosophy of mind.
Do you think the religious
we've got audio. You fixed it, Russell. Whatever you did. You're muted, bro.
Well, according to what the StreamYard told me, they said that some videos don't offer audio and some do. And when you're actually on that, you have to check to see if there's a little line that says audio included. So I just downloaded it so we could hit it from there. So I will start the video now, and Travis can get a taste of what this is, and so can our guest.
All right, and
if
just
atheists argued like,
sounds good.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead, David.
I was gonna say stop it like after each segment, so we can.
That's my plan, man.
apologists, do you think the religious would buy our argument?
Let's see this.
If atheists argued like apologists, do you think the religious would buy our arguments, or do you think that they would find the obvious flaws atheists already see in popular apologetics? Nothing is ever going to convince me that God exists. I admit that that's where I start from. The difference between us is I trust man's word and you trust Ham's word. Some people
There you go. The first one.
See, now this is one where I want to actually agree with him because he's basically going after a really bad sort. Well, I mean, I think all types of presuppositionalism are bad, but here's an obviously bad one. Is well, yeah, if you're just dogmatically starting with the Bible and saying that well, nothing's ever going to change my mind. I'm just assuming that it's true from the start. Well, then yeah, I mean that's closed minded. That's being dogmatic, and obviously the atheist can just do the same thing and say that he's just going to assume that God doesn't exist. And so that's why that sort of apologetic is really not helpful at all.
Travis? Or not, Travis?
I very much disagree with Ken Ham, and I'm willing to grant.
He's willing to grant it. Got it. Well, I'm going to be the one that comes in here in defense of my brother Ham here. Well, okay, so as you said, he starts off, I think, without addressing the argument in the room. Okay, the argument, obviously Ham doesn't just throw that out there at first. There is a substantial conversation before he says, this is man's word, this is God's word. Okay, so you have to deal with why he thinks it's God's word to begin with. And I know he's leaned more presuppositionalist in his later years, but I still think that you're missing a big point. So this is kind of cherry picking sound points. So I would say there's a lot more to the story that needs to be addressed in these clips. So there's a lot more to the argument that needs to be addressed. So anyways, and you got to deal with the argument, not just say, but I get his point. So I'm going to applaud Drew on the fact that, yeah, we do need to listen to what our arguments sound like on the other side. So, and I think that's the essence of why he's making this and trying to kind of be captivating as well. So applaud there. But here's the second one.
People say that the existence of goodness proves that God exists, but let me tell you why that's false. Good can only exist if evil exists. You wouldn't even know good exists without evil. Here's the interesting part. Evil only exists in the absence of anything divine. Therefore, because good exists, God doesn't exist. I hate to do it.
All right, here we go. David?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't even seem like there's, obviously, he's leaving out, again, part of the argument here that I think Turek would try to give, and I don't think Turek does the best job on the moral argument, but there are reasons that are going to be given for thinking that good, right, requires the existence of God. So he's going to have to give some kind of parallel for thinking that, evil, well, first of all, that good is contingent upon evil, but that evil actually requires the non-existence of God. And of course, we could get into the problem of evil and things like that. But the point is that that's more or less the conclusion of the moral argument right there. That is not, that's not what leads up to it. So he's got to give us like a relevant parity to show that evil is incompatible with God. And then especially, I mean, I don't really like Turek going and saying that like, oh, well, you couldn't recognize what evil was without good. So, I mean, I'll concede that part of the argument. But the second point that he's making there about not being able to, or about evil being incompatible with God, then he's got to give some sort of relevant argument for that, just like the theist has to give a relevant argument for thinking that good is something that only makes sense in a theistic context.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, except that I think Frank does a presentation before he goes that route. So I think he explains why he thinks good exists, and he sets up his moral argument, and then this is usually during the back and forth. right? So I think he gives an argument, and then this is his conversational route. So yeah, I mean, he's cherry picked again a very small section of the argument, but the fact is Christians don't hold that you can't reverse this argument for the Christian, because even admitting evil is admitting that there is a standard, so it's admitting a theist position. You're already jumping into our realm at that point. So Travis, do you got anything to add on that one?
Yeah, so it sounds like he's taking kind of like an extrapolation from C.S. Lewis's argument that you can't epistemically know that there's something evil unless you know that there's something good, and that sort of, evil would be like a deprivation of the good. And so what I think it boils down to is how we ground objective moral values and duties, and that's to address. So I don't see his argument as going anywhere, because I think it would be important for both the theist and the non-theist to be able to ground, like how we ground objective morality is the bigger issue.
Yeah, and if you guys want to see a great video on that we just did last month, one of our atheist guests and our friend Caleb hosted, and actually Honest Atheist hosted Swansona, and they had him and Aaron had a debate on morality and so forth. So check that one out if you want a better argument for morality and see kind of where that takes you. And also, if you're going to listen to Turek, listen to his debate. Don't just listen to his one section or one comment. Yeah, but that's pretty much. Anything else to add, David?
No, I think you got it.
All right.
Because the guy who whips out his credentials comes off as just kind of a jerk, but I do have a relevant PhD, making me an expert on this topic. I do know what I'm talking about. The problem is that...
All right, so Riza Aslan, I'm going to totally agree with genetically modified skeptic here. Riza is not a nice person when his views get challenged. I've seen him on more than one occasion.
I think, though, that there is a point here that we can also say that atheists do this too, right? Like Richard Carrier will just appeal to the fact that he has a PhD, or his fans will just be like, oh, Richard Carrier has a PhD, so that makes him right. So Drew is right that, yeah, having credentials doesn't make you right, like, at all. And the same thing applies, when an atheist does it. And I mean, I think Drew would recognize that, but that I think is a point that we should also emphasize here, is that appeals to just credentialism are always going to be fallacious.
Travis?
I would agree.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
That's
I think it lends some credibility, but it certainly doesn't anything.
Yeah.
You've suppressed the truth in irrationality. Deep down, you know that God doesn't exist because you can't know anything without the understanding of that fundamental truth of the universe. That's my proof. Now the burden is on you to disprove it.
All right, David, I know you want this one. So you go first.
Oh, I mean, I think he's right here. Sci-10 Bruggencate. I mean, and even presuppositionalists will tell you that Sci-10 Bruggencate did terrible with presuppositional apologetics. I hate to hate on the man, just, given, what that he's recently, confessed to some sin and, pulled out from the ministry. But, just as it stands, is that, yeah, his apologetic methodology was not effective. You don't just get to, assert that rationality, that presupposes my worldview. Even if that's the case, you need to give us some kind of argument to show us how you're getting there. You need to connect the dots for us. You need to show us why it is that rationality is presupposing your worldview. And, we can talk about things like, do the laws of logic have to be grounded in God or something like that? And there are arguments to that effect, and there are responses to that effect. But just stating it, it's just a statement. So, yeah, Bruggencate was really bad about giving arguments to that effect. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with Drew for calling him out on that.
Right on, right on. Travis, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would basically agree. I tend to focus like like for the inference, making an inference to the best explanation. I tend to favor more modest arguments. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I would have to jump on the same line, but I do want some clarification, and I do want to comment a little bit more on it as far, David, as the aspect of what did you think of his reverse argument? Like, what do you want to? Is there any specifics that lends credit to? Is like basically does his reverse argument do its damage to actual presuppositional apologetics?
I mean, I think so. If you're just at least as Bruggencate is doing it, right? Bruggencate is just stating his opinion, which is that rationality, and knowing things that you have to presuppose the Christian worldview. Well, then the atheist can just assert that too. Now, if you want to be a smarter presuppositionalist, somebody like James Anderson and Greg Welty, they're actually going to give a syllogistic argument for why they think that the laws of logic require at least theism. I don't think their argument goes to Christian theism, but they will, they'll give an argument for that. Now, if that's the argument that Drew wanted to go after, then no, his parody wouldn't work at all, because they aren't just asserting it. They're actually giving a legit argument. So I think that his parody is effective against Bruggencate, but not against all forms of presuppositionalism. Okay,
we lost Travis there, it looks like. But yeah, I just put out, if anybody else wants to come on and join, I just put out the link. You just hit this link here and you can come on and join our little broadcast here. But yeah, David, what do you do with that scripture though? That Romans 1:21, is it?
Well, what about
it? I mean, let's go over that real quick. I mean, are unbelievers suppressing the truth in their unrighteousness?
Yeah, sure. I think that is completely biblical. But that doesn't mean you can't know anything without presupposing the Christian worldview. That goes well beyond what it says. Romans 1 says that God's existence is clearly seen through what has been made, and that unbelievers suppress that truth. They suppress that evidence in unrighteousness. Nothing about the necessity of presupposing one worldview to account for laws of logic, or wherever else presuppositionalists want to go with that. It's not there, man. It says that God's existence is clearly seen through what has been made. That's evidentialism.
Well, what about the problem of induction, David?
Oh, you wanted to go there.
I'm teasing you, man. I'm just trying to get you ready for your debate coming up. All right, let's continue.
Pretty sure I'm qualified to speak on this because I have a degree in this topic. Do you have a degree in this? See, our starting point is that there's definitely no God. That's what we come into any discussion believing. Then, when new data is presented to us, we interpret the data through our worldview to fit our belief that God doesn't exist. That's how we can reliably come to know that there's no God.
All right, before he yells about Riza here, let's go to Mr. Hovind.
It's
another presuppositionalist here.
See, there is a lot in this video that I can agree with. Again, I think against people who want to say that, yeah, we're just starting out from that and we're using that to interpret everything else. Well, yeah, you can do that for anything. You can just say that, these are my presuppositions and I'm going to force everything else to fit inside of them. And indeed, I mean, we see this happen with young earth creationists all the time, that they will, they presuppose their young earth creationism, and then any scientific data that doesn't fit that, they force that to, comport with it. And you can make any hypothesis complicated enough by coming up with these ad hoc add-ons to account for the data. That's why simplicity is viewed as a good, when we're looking for explanation, that's why we like simplicity, because it means it shaves off, all that ad hocness. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that Hovind's approach is completely terrible, and I agree with Drew on this one as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep it with you, man. And the funny part's coming up here in a little bit, so I'm gonna let that play because I think it's coming up here pretty shortly.
I have a degree!
Why would you want there to be a God? Why would you want to live in such a tyrannically governed dystopia where there's no hope or purpose but to give praise unto a being which apparently cares so little for your existence? So, to our benefit, with some difficulty, with a certain amount of historical knowledge, we construct a belief that helps us discover what we ought to do and how we ought to live, in the belief that there is freedom from such a painful reality.
All right, Peter Hitchens. Funny part's not yet.
That's, the thing is that's not the only argument that Peter Hitchens gives, So to act like that's his whole case is, again, kind of cherry picking. So I'll say that I don't think that those sorts of argument, right, like these psychological Francis Schaeffer kind of arguments, like about how hopeless atheism is, I don't think these are good arguments for proving that God exists, right? Like, obviously, just because, like, even if, let's say that reality would be ultimately hopeless if God did not exist.
Yeah.
That wouldn't prove that God does exist, right? But there is another issue here that sometimes people will be like, well, why does it matter if God exists, right? They'll be like, why should I care? And then I find these psychological kinds of arguments to be much more useful there, right? They don't prove to us that God exists, but they do give us a useful reason for considering that he does. And so, if the argument's being used to try to prove theism, not a good argument. And of course, his parody obviously doesn't work at all against this one because
absolutely.
There's just no reason that theism would be hopeless in a similar way to the way atheism would be.
Yeah, I agree. Again, like you said, cherry picking, and then there's the idea, I call these like expressive arguments, right? Like they're expressions. Like these are something you express to somebody after you've known them, after you've talked about the existence of God, and it takes place at a certain time. But so I mean that's kind of the way I've always looked at it. That's kind of how I've labeled it in my brain. So, but all right, so let's see if we get to the funny part yet. Oh yeah.
You say there's a God. I say, can you prove that? You say no. I say, I don't believe you then.
This is what evolutionists have been searching for hundreds of years. This is called the crocodile. Can you see this?
God, I'm not.
Let me ask you something. Are you a theist?
Yeah, I am.
Have you ever told a lie?
Yeah, everyone has.
Have you ever stolen something?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, probably.
Do you think everyone would say those things are wrong all the time?
I think it really depends on who you ask. I don't know if everyone would say it's wrong all the time.
Right, therefore morality is subjective. There is no God.
What?
That was hilarious. I love the whole parody there, but he starts with Ricky Gervais, right? That's how you say it? Jarvis, whatever.
Yeah.
So like, I do want to hit that first because there is this notion that this whole standard of proof. Like, what do you mean by proof? There's various types of ways to prove things, and I think there's this notion that the scientific method is the only way that we come to know things.
Right, like scientism.
Yeah, and I think that's the world we live in these days. And philosophical truths and other epistemic truths are just not considered anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, with that, I think it's, I would like to ask, what do you mean by proof? And then there's the whole theological notion behind that. Like, God's not just worried about belief that, but our belief in, but also that belief that, right? So he's more concerned about developing this relationship with you over time. So, anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on Jarvis there. But he goes into to Ray Comfort. That's I get a kick out of it because I watched those shows, man. I saw when they came out, you know. I crocodile moment, you know. So I hang my head in shame on that, and I learned that, you know, I applied Comfort's method when I was really young in my faith, you know, kind of the relate, create, convict, reveal method that he promotes, right? So, but there is a actual some merit to the relate part, right? And creating a whole for your topic, you know, and that's always benefited me. But to convict is not to condemn, and that's usually where that goes. And when I see people use that methodology, it oftentimes leads there, especially when he starts walking you backwards, calling you basically letting yourself call yourself uh a thief, murderer, and adulterer, right? So I mean, so I don't think that's a good approach, you know. And um it kind of starts with the notion that God already exists, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the relevant parody he's making here is that, like, when Ray asks people, basically, do you think like everyone would say that this is wrong? And they would say yes. Well, then, you know, Ray tries to go from that to a universal moral law. In Drew's case, he, Drew said, oh, well, I think it would depend on who you ask. Well, then, therefore, morality is subjective. And so I think that the point of the parody he's trying to make there is that, like, just because it's what one person thinks, it doesn't translate into reality, right? If one person thinks a moral law is universal and another person doesn't, then one person's, would be evidence for a universal moral law just as much as the other person's would be evidence for subjective morality. And I think that, like, this is why it's better to, like, give actual arguments for moral realism than, to just be like, oh, well, what do you think about this? On the other hand, there can be a certain value to it, right? That, if a person does feel that there really is a universal moral law, right, that morality is objective, then they need to take the moral argument seriously. Someone doesn't, then you're going to have to go a different route, and you're going to have to, like, start giving syllogistic arguments for objective morality. So it's not entirely a bad approach. I mean, if somebody already accepts, this premise of the argument, right, that there is objective morality, then absolutely use that in your argument that God exists. If the person believes that morality is subjective, again, you're going to have to get there through a different method. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thought there, is that if it was intended to be a proof that there was a universal moral law, just that someone agrees to it, then his parody would work. But I don't think that is the point. I think the point is to try to get them to see that they already agree with that premise of the argument. And to the extent that they do, it's completely appropriate to, use that and to, then try to get them to see the implications of that concession.
Yeah, I see the value in every method. Well, not almost every method, but a lot of these methods have a time and a place to where they're used. Comfort's going just out in the street, walking around college campuses or beaches or wherever he goes. And those might be effective because you are relating to the crowd by saying, hey, what do you think about this, right? And then you hand the mic over, right? So then you can actually kind of assess, where they're at. I just wouldn't take it the route he does afterwards. So, but because it presupposes a lot. I think at that point, like you said, we have to establish moral realism, and we have to take that seriously and maybe present the argument at that point. And
you may not have to. You may not have to. If the person is already a moral realist, and let's face it, most people are, then you've already got one premise in the argument granted. So then you've just got to draw out the implications from there. You only have to start giving arguments for moral realism if you come up against a moral subjectivist. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with, just discovering the fact that someone they already agree with this part of the argument.
Yep. All right, now he's about to attack my dad, so I'm gonna have to. No, I'm just joking. Daddy Craig over here.
Maximally great naturalistic law of physics exists in some possible world. But if such a law exists in some possible world, it must exist in every possible world. If it exists in every possible world, it exists in the actual world. Therefore, a maximally great naturalistic law of physics exists in the actual world. This precludes the existence of a truly omnipotent God, as only the law is maximally great. You can't have a rationally justified...
All right, David, address the ontological argument. I always overthink the ontological argument. I did for years until I realized actually how simple it was.
It's really unbelievable that that I guess that he would think this parody works, because this grants like so much of the argument.
Yeah.
There's like, you couldn't have a maximally great law, right? Because there are certain great making properties that are only possessed by beings, right? Something like morality, something like intelligence, something like will. These are great making properties, and at least under no definition of a law that I'm familiar with can you have any of that. So either this law is just equivalent to God and we're going to give it all the omni attributes, or else you can't have a maximally great law. It's a contradictory idea. But if you're going to agree that, there is such a thing as maximal greatness, right, that you could have something that's maximally great, well, that actually grants the more important premise of the ontological argument. That is, if it is possible that God exists, then God does exist. And so, that parody, we can just show that does not work. And we can do that with any parody to the ontological argument, right? Maximally great islands, maximally great pizzas, maximally great gambling dice, whatever you want. It's either going to have to possess the attributes of God, or if it doesn't have them, then it won't be maximally great. That's how the argument works. You have to show that this is a being that can't exist, or you have to show that the argument is formally invalid or something like that. But no parody of the ontological argument is ever going to work, because nothing is going to be as great as a maximally great being.
Yeah. Not to mention naturalistic law in itself as being maximally great is an actually contradiction in terms, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I mean, that's just beyond it, and especially when you look at the philosophy of possible worlds and so forth, actual world and so forth. So I mean, yeah. So yeah, I get that and I agree. There's one other thing that I was gonna say on this. His acumen right here is what is displayed. He doesn't understand the philosophical argument. So this goes to show, like, okay, if you're going to make an argument, at least understand the argument you're getting it from, because obviously he botches the whole thing. And this is why I'm so careful. I think I get paranoid over this, and maybe this is because I have crazy anxiety issues at times, but I don't want to speak unless I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say anything that's going to throw me off. I have before, and it never ends well. You end up getting the tables flipped on you, and then you look stupid. So as now, this is his position. He doesn't understand the ontological argument. He doesn't understand the argument. He doesn't understand the philosophy behind the argument. So I'm not going to embarrass him as bad as you just did. I was just going to point out a couple things, but let's move on, because he's about to hit another moral part of the moral argument here with Ravi.
Basis of morality without basing it on well-being rather than God. If someone has a different God than another, there's essentially no way one could argue their moral basis over the other. Morality must come from outside one's own faith. Oh wait, that actually makes sense. I studied quantum physics under John Polkinghorne, perhaps you know the name, one of the world's leading quantum physicists, and I did this at Cambridge University, so I am qualified to talk about issues surrounding the universe's origin. Just don't fact-check any of that. These arguments are all pretty ridiculous, just as they are when they're used in defense of religion. It's really easy to see the flaws in others' arguments, but it's difficult to see the flaws in our own. Because of that, it's useful to turn around certain arguments and see what they sound like coming from the other side. Sometimes this exposes flaws in arguments that are touted even by professional representatives of a certain position. So please, whatever side you're on, ask yourself what you'd think of your own arguments if you heard them used for the opposite position. There's a chance that doing that may help you understand why the argument is weak and should be either modified or entirely tossed out. If religious apologists would only do that, then there would probably be way fewer religious apologists.
All right. Well, that was pretty much it. Travis said, I agree. Genetically modified skeptic doesn't seem to have a very robust understanding of philosophy or metaphysics. And that's true. I mean, it did show. But I agree with his last point that, I'm not going to even address the Ravi one because, it was kind of like funny. And then he just went to insulting his character. But I'm not going to go any. I'm not going to say anything on that, but I do agree with his last point and go over your own arguments before you give them. Know what you're talking about before you say them. Listen to what it sounds like from the other side. Ask them what it sounds like. This is why I'm all about relational apologetics as well, because you actually get to know the person. I think that's one of the best ways to do apologetics. So, yeah.
Yeah, and regarding his advice there, we would also want to add to that. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with him that always, flip an argument to see if the other side could, use it. But if you're going to flip it, make sure that, you are actually there's got to be a relevant connection between the argument that you're parodying and the actual argument. So it's got to be of the same form. In some of cases, his parodies were, and we noted that. But there were other cases where either there's a defeater, like in the case of the ontological argument, when you try to parody it, that you can't actually have a relevant parody for the ontological argument. Well, guess what? Now you've got to face the argument. In other cases, it just like in the case of trying to parody the moral argument, there was just no relevant connection. He was just going after the conclusion that maybe Turek would try to make, but not going after the connection from good to God, right? So he would have to show us some reason to think that there is a connection between evil and God's non-existence. And of course, many atheists have done that. And, so that there's a relevant discussion to be had about the problem of evil. But he didn't go there. So, we agree with his advice, but we wish he applied it a little more consistently.
Yeah, I hear you. There is one more discussion that we need to have, David.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, I turned on Reasons to Doubt the other day. And this is a good discussion. They actually decided to discuss moral miracles. Did you listen to that?
I did not. I didn't even know they did it.
Yeah. They actually had a follow-up discussion and tagged us in it, or tagged PorA in it. And yeah. So go over and listen to it. I think there's one thing Jordan said that I think we had pretty much the same miracle argument almost. I think there's only a couple things that were modified, but they were coming from the same place. I mean, so when Jordan was like, I agree with Paulman's view more because he agreed with your view more, I was like, well, it was kind of the same argument. I just gave a little history behind the Thomistic and the other one, the other guy that quoted it years later, so, but yeah, so they went after miracles, and what it seemed to me is that they reverted back to the same old atheistic stuff. So tell me what you think, and we can actually talk about that. Maybe have Jordan and Jared back on for another episode on it. But yeah.
And don't forget, we've got to debate them and pretend to be atheists while they pretend to be Christians.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna still do that, guys. We're still with you on that. We love you guys over there. To doubt, everybody. If you like tonight's broadcast, I just want you to hit that like or subscribe button. That helps us out tremendously as far as being able to produce more content get more stuff for our computers. As you know, David, he doesn't have a good computer, so he can only connect half the time. So if we ever decide to get enough of monetization, maybe we could coax him into coming back onto PRA after he leaves, because I don't think it's going to happen before he leaves. But yeah, if you guys
miracles are possible, Russell.
Yes.
Miracles
If
happen.
you guys like the content, just subscribe, hit the like, do all that type of stuff. We have coming up next a debate between myself. I am debating. David is going to be hosting a show on Is Easter a Pagan Holiday? And I'll be debating
Yes,
with
it is.
Nash. No last name. Yes, that's her handle. So she will be coming on, and she is practicing pagan. And yeah, then David will be debating a presuppositionalist after that. We may have to postpone that one. We don't know what's there's some things that have been transpiring that we just ask that you keep the entire team in prayer on. So yeah, David, you got any last parting words for our fans?
I was gonna say, obviously, the reason is that Brian is, terrified of going up against me. But
what were you guys talking about when they said that you gave you gave your argument online or something? Was that just a joke?
No. I in Reason and Religion, I posted my opening statement to get some feedback on it, and so I guess someone sent it to him. But I trust Brian. He wouldn't look at it. He's got more honor than some presuppositionalists I've engaged with.
Yeah, Brian's really good. As far as like being relational and nice, me and him disagreed and butted heads, and it was probably when I first started really diving into apologetics. Probably in apologetics for only like 2 years at that point, but yeah, he's a good guy, and I trust him too. So that's why I wanted to get him on. So yeah, I agree. Thank you, Jesus. Fake news. Easter is not a pagan holiday. And that's what I will be arguing, that it is not a pagan holiday. And, even through all my emails with Nash, I don't know if she's actually going to affirm that too. That would be something if that actually was the case. But no, it should be fun. It should be fun. It should be a fun debate, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be Saturday at 7. So she requested that it be pre-recorded because she's still having some finicky internet issues out in where she lives. So it's going to be a pre-record, but I'll set it as a premiere so that we can all jump on and go back over it and talk it out if we want to. Paulman probably won't be there, but he's a heretic, so I expect that. So I'm just joking. All right, but anyways, guys, it was good to see everybody. Thanks for coming on, Travis. Thanks for all the comments in the comment section, and until next time, guys, take care.